Good afternoon again, everyone. For those of you who joined us yesterday or over the past few weeks, welcome back. And if you're new to all of this, welcome. I'm Mark Healy. I'm the Executive Director of the Ivey Academy, the Learning and Development Wing of the Business School in London. Thanks very much for taking time out of your day today. We hope you get some value here. If you've been tuning into these sessions over the past few weeks, you'll know we're trying to figure out kind of what to do and how to act just like everyone else. It's hard to know what to do right now. We know our purpose hasn't changed and we know our vision and strategy haven't changed, but of course our approach has to change. And so we've decided that for now, we should just try to be helpful and to do it in a humble way. We're in fortunate positions here. We're not on the front lines or helping directly like healthcare professionals or grocery store workers or people keeping supply chains open. And for those of you who are, the whole Ivey community is behind you. But this morning, I had the pleasure of hosting one of these sessions with Kim Furlong. She's the president and CEO of the Canadian Venture Capital Association, a partner of ours. And we had 3 lawyers on talking about employment law considerations, government programs, and such for their membership. The discussion was very informative. I know I learned a lot. It got quite technical and mechanical at times. Here, we're not going to try and be super technical or mechanical, but we know HR, talent, culture, employee issues are top of mind for everyone in the Ivey community. Of course they are. We've had so many questions about what the right thing to do is, but actually more questions have been prognostications kind of about what is this new normal everyone's talking about? What's it going to be like? So today we're going to dig into that and try to surface some points of view and advice we hope it can help. Let's meet our guest today. Val Duffey is with us. Val is a CHRO, has dedicated her career to driving organizational competitiveness and profitability through people. Companies in transition rely on her ability to plug in quickly, assess future-focused capabilities, and translate business priorities into actionable people strategies. As a CHRO, she's committed to building healthy work environments that become accelerators of organizational success. Val was previously VP HR and corporate services at GTAA, Canada's largest airport, and has held HR leader roles at lots of large corporations like Aviva and KPMG. Marty Parker is with us. Marty's the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Waterstone Human Capital. Waterstone is a leading retained executive search firm specializing in recruiting for fit and cultural talent management, provide leadership development, succession planning, cultural assessment, cultural alignment consulting in entrepreneurial-minded, high-growth organizations throughout North America. Marty's considered a global leader, expert on human capital, corporate culture. He's a frequent commentator and keynote speaker on issues surrounding leadership, organizational culture, and the author of the book, Culture Connection, How Developing a Winning Culture Will Give Your Organization a Competitive Edge. And Cathy Sprague is with us. Cathy's the Executive Vice President of Human Resources at Bruce Power. Her role is to oversee Bruce Power's HR function, including labor relations, recruitment, talent management, employee engagement, wellness, and total rewards. Along with the Chief Executive Officer and other EVPs, she also serves as a member of Bruce Power's executive team, a member of the management committee, dealing with pension administration, human resources codes of conduct. And prior to joining Bruce Power, Cathy was most recently served as corporate VP of HR with JD Irving in New Brunswick. And we saw some news, Cathy, from your organization about a giant donation of PPE. Congratulations to you on that. As always, I'm going to host and direct traffic a bit. We have our producer, that's Sean Ackland-Grant, with us. Sean's going to be our tech lead. He'll keep track of the Q&A in the chat, curating questions for us. And Sean and I will come in with themes that kind of emerge as we go. And we have Dave Loree with us. So Dave's going to be our lead moderator today. Dave Loree is a professor, joined the Ivey Business School in July of 2000. Before moving to Ivey, he was a faculty member in the management department at Texas A&M, where he served as core faculty member of the full-time MBA program. Dave received a BS in electrical engineering from Bradley University, an MBA from the University of Dallas, and a PhD in organization strategy and international management from the University of Texas. Before moving into exec ed, he previously worked as a design and reliability engineer at Texas Instruments. Dave's one of our faculty directors here at the Academy. He's by far the biggest Blue Jays fan that I know and a giant rock and roll fan, which you can probably already tell. And he's really a legend with our custom clients. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw to Sean. Sean, I want you to talk a bit about how things are going to work today. And if you could put that poll up that we teed up, that would be great.
Thanks, Mark. Sure thing. So welcome again, everyone, for tuning in from home. We're going to be kicking off the broadcast with that poll today, just to see who we have in the audience. But before we get to that, I want to point out the Q&A icon in the bottom of your window. Feel free to use that, send in questions during the session, and you can also upvote questions that you like to make sure they kind of bubble to the top. For any questions we aren't able to work in live, we'll be posting text answers along with the full recording of the broadcast on our blog at iveyacademy.com. So we'll start with the poll, which essentially just asks what best describes your industry or expertise. We've got 5 options there. It's anonymous and there are no right answers. So kind of whatever category between private enterprise, public companies, government, NGO, not-for-profit, and then there's options around unionized and non-unionized as well. So we'll give that another couple of seconds. We've got about 60% voted so far. Okay. So there are our results. About 43% category A, private enterprise and non-unionized. Interestingly, second highest is government, NGO, and not-for-profits at 24%.
Interesting. Thanks, John. Listen, I want to say hello to everyone that is connected as well. I think one of the upsides to this, when the invitation went out, is I heard from so many students that I haven't heard from over the years. And just what a nice thing to hear kind of what's going on in your lives and how you're dealing with all of this. So a big hello to all of you. So I just want to thank the panelists, Cathy, Marty, and Val. I think that given your backgrounds, you're going to have so much to offer. And I realize the fuzziness of this notion of what we're talking about, this new normal. But the reality is that I think hearing different perspectives allows us to do a better job of kind of framing this and thinking about what tomorrow's going to look like. So thank you both, all of you, I mean, in advance for jumping on here with us. Since this session is really going to be trying to converge on what this new normal looks like for all of us, what I have found, like when I'm teaching, if I'm teaching a case on strategy, before you can think about the endpoint you want to move to, you have to understand sort of where you're at. And before we jump into this discussion around new normal, I thought I'd like to hear a bit about your perspectives on where you think we're at in this trajectory that we're using to kind of converge towards this new normal. So Val, if you don't mind, I'll start with you and just trying to get a sense of, from your perspective, where do you think we're at with respect to this experience?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And good afternoon, everyone. It's a privilege to be part of such a crucial and timely dialogue with the Ivey community. Dave, to answer the question of where we are right now, I'd like to offer a 4-stage model that provides context to how organizations are moving through their response to the pandemic. So this was devised by my friend Mark Edgar, who is himself a former CHRO of a large insurance company. And he now runs his own consulting firm, Goat Rodeo. And the two of us have been collaborating to develop tools for CHROs to work through the pandemic. And Dave, I'm happy to connect your audience to this work after the call. So the model is a way for leaders to situate themselves along a continuum and be able to see the momentum as the weeks and the months progress. So the first phase is react. And that's where we found ourselves in late February, early March. It was characterized by organizations either pulling their crisis and business continuity plans off the shelf or creating them real time. We were dealing with what is most urgent, so rapidly deploying or creating kind of technology-enabled work from home solutions and policies. And those companies with essential workers were focused on workplace health and safety measures. And of course, many companies were facing into tough choices like closures, downsizing, pay cuts, et cetera. So next is the respond phase, and that's where we are now. So companies with essential workers have ramped up those safety and medical protocols to mitigate employee and business continuity risks. Those with workforces working from home are supporting managers to engage their teams remotely and supporting individuals to deal with the stress and anxiety of isolation and to care for personal and family health concerns. So all in a bid, A, to take care of people, but also to get the organization to be as productive as possible. Senior leaders at this stage are also communicating with as much transparency and clarity as possible to their employees and their customers. So we're still in this phase, and there does seem to be a bit of breathing room to take stock and begin to prepare for the next phase, which is the reconnect phase. So that's when companies can reopen, welcome people back to work. And the CEOs and CHROs that I've been talking to this week and last are working through the return to work plan. So they include things like considerations for physical distancing in the workplace, staggered scheduling, the issuing of PPE, employee health monitoring, such as temperature checks, and of course, enhanced technology and communication platforms. So once the restrictions are eased, that reconnect phase will be about starting to create the new normal by deploying those new work practices, while at the same time continuing to accommodate individual circumstances. And everyone I've talked to believes that this new normal will be a hybrid of working from home and working in physical work locations, or some companies have just gone completely remotely in this kind of being opportune because we've learned so much and have built and flexed so much muscle around working remotely. Finally, the reimagine stage. That phase will be an opportunity to consciously create the next normal. So to consider, what is the silver lining in all of this? What have we learned? And how do we reset the fundamentals of the organization in terms of what we value, what our purpose is, what capabilities we need as an organization to thrive in a post-COVID world, what we expect of employees, and especially what we expect of our leaders. And at the same time, we need to maintain all of that newfound crisis response capability, because we will likely be facing into a second and potentially a third wave before a vaccine is developed. So Dave, I'm going to put that back to you now.
Well, I like the framework. That makes that's a nice way to kind of segment it and think about the different phases that we're in. So if I heard you, you're saying that we're kind of all in this respond stage. And I think it's so interesting that Cathy and Marty are going to have different perspectives, given that they are involved with very different organizations. I mean, I guess if I had to sort of summarize it, I think about Cathy and your business at Bruce Power is that people still need power, right? So you've still got the revenue coming in. I'm sure some things have changed internally, but I wouldn't say you've been completely sort of upended by this. Whereas Marty, I think you're in a slightly different position, which is, it has really kind of really impacted the state of your business. So Cathy, let's start with you. I'm kind of curious about how you might consider what Val shared around this framework. Where do you think you're at? Where's your organization at on this trajectory?
Sure, and I don't have a sort of a model to go by, but I'll tell you where we are, and then we're putting some thought into what our future would look like, but I'll hold that out for some other questions. So I can't help myself. So in case you don't know who Bruce Power is, we are around 8 nuclear units up on Lake Huron, producing about 6,400 megawatts of power, clean power, low cost power. I checked this morning on our website, and we were producing 34.7% of all power going into the province of Ontario this morning. Wow. So in addition, we're a leading producer of medical isotopes. And the reason I bring that up, because I think it's just really key right now. So we harvest cobalt-60 in our nuclear units, and out of our units and cobalt-60, we produce enough to provide to sterilize 40% of all medical equipment in hospitals globally. Can you imagine now in hospitals how much sterilization is important? And so cobalt-60 coming out of the reactors in Bruce Power is producing 40% of the demand or the supply to meet the demand out there. In addition, we have lutetium-177 that in a couple of years we'll start treating, be really great as medical grade to treat prostate cancer. So I want to start it with there because I think it's kind of really important. And then, what we started really early. We started back in January, and thank goodness we did, because I think we really got to jump on things. And then into February, and we are very fortunate because of just the nature of the organization we run in. We have the ability to stand up sort of crisis management teams because we're always ready to deal with emergencies. I probably should just back up to say that, we're pretty fortunate. Thank goodness we're producing power. And can you imagine going through a crisis like this right now without power? I mean, it's bad, but it would be just so much worse. But as a result, we're an essential service in the province, and we continue to operate, which I think has lots of positives. And then it has things, some downsides, because we're getting to practice some things in the workplace that many people that will be coming back to will get to practice over the coming weeks and months. So we're essential. So we set up an EMC, which is an emergency management response organization. But simultaneous to that, we had a full planning team in place. And they were taking a look at every scenarios to make sure that we could safely run our units. And I'll talk a minute about our values and our behaviors, because I think everything's been grounded in that. And they looked at many, many different scenarios about how we may run within our business. We've got about 4,000 permanent employees, and then we've got 2,000 or 3,000 contractors on site at any given time. So it's a pretty busy spot all in one place. That's interesting, but we have to social distance too, because even back in January and February, we were talking about social distancing, deep cleaning, sanitization, washing our hands. And so we had to make some decisions come, late February and into March about significantly reducing the number of people that we had in our business. And we've done that. So we've got about 1,000-ish on site any given day now. We've got 2,300 acres, so there's plenty of room for people. And we continue on with the planning to either, we've managed to keep our units online, we've managed to keep on a critical outage, but we have full plans in place that if we were struck with COVID, that we could ramp down our business a little bit. And then we've got full plans to sort of bring our business, back to the way that it should be, producing 6,400 megawatts and having major construction on our site. And just really quickly, from the very beginning, our vision is we power the future. And that's been at the backbone of everything we're doing. And then safety first. So everything we're doing, we do with respect to safety, performance excellence, and social responsibility. So Mark, you mentioned off the top about yesterday, we were just like so delighted to give $1.2 million or 1.2 million pieces of PPE. I can't tell you how much hard work went into giving that, because getting this stuff out of China to get distributed through Ontario is yeoman's work for many, many, many people. But our employees are so proud of this. And because corporate social responsibility is so important to us and community is so important to us, people are just beaming, so proud of what we're doing. And it feeds right into our values as an organization. And it will continue to feed, everything we do will be based on our vision and our values and our behaviors and our excellence model and our accountability model as we go forward. So I've got a bunch more, but I thought I would start there. I do want to do a big shout out, because I know it's hard to work from home through this time and people are feeling, restless and isolated. And I respect all that. We've got thousands of people at home every day. And I really appreciate all them, but we've got, at least 1,000+ people in our business every day. That creates a whole different level of stress. And we're doing everything we can for them. I'll talk about some of the things we're doing, because it will be the kinds of things we're doing for the next weeks, months, and years likely. And so we want to make sure, because those people they're doing such a fabulous job, making sure that we all have power. So I'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's where we are.
Great that you're acknowledging that, Cathy, no doubt. And it'll be good to hear some of those really tactical things that you're doing when we move through into a slightly different pasture. Marty, a different world for you compared to, say, Cathy and Bruce Power. So, could you tell us a little bit about where you see yourself on this trajectory and, like the impact for you right now?
Sure. And we're really fortunate in so many ways, because we have a window into so many businesses and what we do in professional services. But I might, David, speak about this in 3 ways: how it's affecting us, kind of what we see as where our client organizations are right now, folks involved in our Canada's Most Admired program who we talked to. And then we haven't even published it, will later this week, but we surveyed just under a couple of thousand leaders across Canada on how they felt their readiness was to deal with this crisis. And I'll share a little bit of a broader perspective. So starting with us, our purpose at Waterstone is to build high performance cultures. And, we do it in 3 ways, through our retained executive search business, our core business, through leadership training and development in our Building High Performance Teams program, and through a culture and engagement research analytics business. Well, I can tell you, our executive search business has been drastically affected. I mean, within days of this becoming apparent to all of us, we basically had about half of our business on hold. Within a week, another half, and within the last few weeks, probably between some searches being put on hold and others that we're completing at a rapid pace, because people are accessible in many industries, certainly not in some others. It's been something unlike we've ever seen before. And I've been through in a leadership role 3 economic downturns. So, people just aren't going to be rushing through and hiring. And that's a reflection of what's happening today. And we all understand that. Quite differently on our culture and engagement side, we're not starting any assignments. There's too many people being affected on the front line and other people who are displaced or at home. But we're pulsing more than we ever have. We're touching base with our existing client relationships with folks either on the front line, individuals have been furloughed or in transition or working from home, and lots of interesting learning there. So that's different, the amount of short survey, 3-4 questions. In our training side, we were already adept to doing a bunch of our leadership training digitally. Certainly not all and not the majority. Most of that work has, initially been delayed. Most all of it is back on stream, and people have adapted incredibly well to that. Now the requirement need for ongoing content, be that, in curriculum, in video, is even beyond our capacity to produce right now. And it's going to teach us some new skills in what is a relatively new business. Now, in terms of our clients, it's incredible what we hear organizations like Bruce Power doing. I mean, truly, Cathy, to you and your colleagues, exceptional. But I kind of see it in two camps. We have client organizations, folks involved in our most admired cultures or most admired CEO programs, who are very much affected by this distributed, disrupted workforce, who may be at home, furloughed, in transition. And I think they're over dealing with it, but they are still having to address those issues and what those really mean. And I'm generalizing a big group. And then another group like Bruce Power, who have folks on the front line. And it could be businesses that are essential. It could be, in the long-term care business, we have a client right now. You can imagine the amount of energy that they're expanding to kind of manage that. But they're really dealing with employee, in that case, physical safety, let alone psychological safety, dealing with their concerns, the fear, their unknown. And that's en masse just a significant issue for leaders and their teams out there today. So, we're fielding a lot of questions on that. But the good news is, when you hear wonderful stories like Bruce Power, we ask the question on a scale of 1 to 10. We call it a readiness question, but how leaders out there felt that if they felt ready to lead through this crisis, because some of us didn't see it coming as fast as others, most of us not. And then to tell us why they selected that rating. And 78% of the respondents, leaders across Canada, said they felt ready, which to me is incredible. But why is even more incredible? 81% those said that 81% that they had a great team working alongside them throughout this. So they really felt supported by people. 64% that it was a highly engaged workforce. And 50% said that they had a strong disaster or communications plan to deal with this or issues like that. And to me, that's super impressive and encouraging. And whether we're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel yet or not, I would say that speaks to an exceptional kind of Canadian leadership landscape out there. So 3 different perspectives, mind you, but I thought I'd share them nonetheless.
I appreciate it, Marty. Listen, and as someone I've lived in Canada for 20 years now from the States, but once in a while you have these points where you just realize how lucky we are to be in this country. And a lot of the things that have occurred over the last 10, 20 years, I think I wouldn't wish this situation on anybody, but the reality is I think we are in a better place than a lot of other countries and organizations in thinking about how to deal with this. We've been laying this foundation for a long time. Now it's time to actually put it into play. So yeah, I found that interesting. And I love that stat you provided about not just how many feel ready, but why, and this notion of having a great kind of team to surround them. If one thing has been really clear for me, and I'm sure it is for most, is that none of us are going to get through this as a solo act, right? Okay. And we found, myself, Mark, Sean at Ivey, we found people pitching in and doing things that you never expected or thought that they were capable of. But this is definitely an all hands on deck thing, right? So thanks for your thoughts about sort of where we're at. What I'd like to do is just to get a sense of your ideas about what this notion of a new normal means. When I hear that phrase, I don't in any way think that new normal implies that we're going to be exactly where we were before. I think there are going to be some changes and some differences to where we're landing. I'm just curious about your perspectives about what you think of when you hear this phrase new normal, what does it mean for you? Right. So Cathy, could I ask you, like at Bruce Power, what does new normal look like?
Sure. And you know what, David, I have to say sometimes I don't know. And, through this whole process, since we've been at it for, going on 3 months, we've had to say, I don't know a number of times, because you think, one day, and then the very next day you get a whole new piece of information and it changes what you believed the day before. Yeah. So, we can go on the best information that we've got going at this time, but we don't know exactly, but what, we'll figure it out. We're going to get better day by day. the one I said earlier, we're an essential service. And so that actually has helped us. And I think we've got a little bit of a leg up as a result of that, because we've had so many workers in our workplace. And so as a result, we've got to practice what the new normal is going to look like. And we've got to try some things that have been wildly successful. And then we've tried some things that have been less than successful. And so then we pivoted and are doing some different things. And I think that's going to be actually the way that we're all working going forward. Yeah. So we've got to practice, extremes, like really doing complex work in less than ideal conditions sometimes, in a very, very different way. And so you can't do that without extreme communication in your workplace. And so the way we're going to communicate with our employees going forward will be very, very different. And it's got to be constant as well, because a lot of people left the workplace. They're going to come back to it, whatever the new normal is, with a whole new expectations about potentially how they're going to do the job, what's expected of them, or maybe not even be back in the workplace, because we're going to have probably some sort of permanent hybrid way of working. But you know what, as essence though, it's going to go right back to the basics. And because, we've been dealing with a bunch of public health people. They've been in our business, they've toured with us, they've taken a look at our control rooms, because we're looking for this magic bullet. And unfortunately, there's just no magic bullet. It goes back to hand washing, sanitation and deep cleaning of your facilities, physical and social distancing, and then just looking for some new technologies, like, how people come into work, how people leave work, how you're going to probably do a temperature checking in your workplace when you come back. We're doing it every day. 1,000 people are having their temperatures taken every day they come through our site. And then our control room staff are doing it 3 times by themselves for the day as well. As we come back to the workplace fairly quickly, they're going to have technology for all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then
I have a follow-on that I'd like to ask you, but I'm actually going to hold it off, because given that I've worked with your organization for a while, I know just how core one of your values is around safety. And, there's a weird tension with safety, because you don't allow a lot of pivoting and trying things in a culture of safety, because usually it's all about kind of sticking to what works. And so maybe after we hear a little bit from Val and Marty, I'd like to come back to this notion of how do you kind of temper this notion that you see the new normal as involving a lot of adaptation?
And I can give you a great example when we come back, David, just around even the use of masks, because we had to try them out in simulators before we ever let them go into our workplace, because safety was paramount.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I scribbled a note to myself. We'll definitely come back to that. Val, Marty, no real structure to this. Just one kind of curious, when you hear this phrase new normal, like, what do you think it's going to mean for us?
Yeah, I think, so Cathy just talked about something that I think is really coming true for organizations. And I certainly saw this when I worked at the airport. The intersection between having a safe workplace and having an innovative workplace, they do not need to be, kind of opposite terms. We have proven to ourselves that rapid design, getting it, not putting it out there before it's perfect, kind of going for speed over elegance, is a way of working for all those organizations that had, these cumbersome, months long, years long transformation agendas and plans and change plans. We've proven to ourselves that we can do it, kind of overnight. So the digitization plans, the transformation plans, we can do that now. And I don't see that going backward. I think, we've also heard some of the thinkers like Josh Bersin talk about relinquished hierarchy, the rise of the unbossed organization, trusting employees and distributing decision-making. I think that's something that will be kind of part of the new normal. Cathy talked about kind of having hyper clarity around and celebration around mission and purpose. So I think that the winners will definitely get that right. I think that, what I'm starting to call zero-based everything is going to be the new normal. So whether it's the HR department or any part of the market-facing or the organization-facing organization, thinning out, getting super clear about what's mission critical and letting go of everything else. Because we have to work efficiently, we have to streamline, we have to go low touch, no touch with our processes and systems, but B, because we just can't afford for any fat to kind of find its way back into the organization. I think the other piece that is going to, again, be mission critical for every organization, and essential worker organizations have already wrapped their heads around this, is that medical knowledge, medical testing, medical protocols, and there's some concerns around privacy and how does that intersect, but those are going to be part of the new normal in every organization. And then the last one I'll talk about is just, kind of, again, hyper innovation. And having kind of a beginner's mindset, letting go of the past, and being able to look at, well, again, it's really that kind of zero-based planning in all parts of the organization. I think those will be the things that are just part of the new normal in every workplace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, understand. Marty, what are your thoughts when you hear new normal?
Well, obviously, I preoccupy a lot of my thinking in this area of culture and its impact on performance. But to give you a sense of that first kind of week for many of us, certainly not for some others of us who are ahead of this, but in early to mid-March, I think I had, in a period of about 4 days, 73 phone calls on how will this, if we make this decision, impact my culture? What if we do this? Yeah. And it was overwhelming. It was fascinating. It was revealing, and I probably was really not up to the task of answering as many as I would like. But I will say that I think—
Sorry to interrupt, Marty. I just want to give you a little bit of slant. If you could do me a favor and grab that thread and pull it a bit, let's talk a bit about this notion of culture and values, which, organizations vary in how formalized they are and how deeply embedded they are. But I think when we think about values, we always hear this phrase that they shouldn't just apply when things are going well. In fact, they matter most when things aren't going well. We're in that state. So how do you balance this notion of culture and values, which seems so inertial, with the idea that we should all be adapting and changing?
Well, I think we should, in times of great stress, people who want to change culture need to do it with caution, because it takes time and it has an impact. But typically, your values are going to stay the same. They evolve much more slowly. In times of these kinds of crisis, culture will change, because we're all under a requirement for it to change. It's important that we align that to our values. And I would say that I think now more than ever, culture will be more important as we move to a more digitized world. And I'll give you a couple of examples, things we're certainly seeing now or addressing now or seeing our clients address. We are going to see a much more distributed workforce. We're going to have, team members and employees that not only won't come back to the workplace, feel like their experience in a remote, when they normally would be in a physical office, needs to be the same. Or so the entire employee experience will need to be as effective digitally or in a distributed new world as it would be in person. And that affects everything. Already we're seeing recruiting where our clients are saying, well, maybe that candidate doesn't need to come into the office. Maybe that opens us up to other markets in the world, where that was much more uncommon a month ago. And now we're seeing, and having to think about our own ability to be able to respond. Onboarding. We've talked about training already and what that will mean. But if you have if you have wellness, yoga classes, a fitness center in your offices, what do you do now for that distributed, digitized worker? Mm-hmm. And what is that content going to need to be? So the impact is massive. And the way we think of it now is the actual leader and the skills of it, the soft skills now of leaders, which we can say always needed to be strong, need to be more acute than ever, and developed in such a way that allow us to have digital empathy. I mean, what the heck was that before? Ensure that we're performance managing, supporting, showing really our own levels of vulnerability and connectivity. It's going to be harder. It's going to be more complex. And so I believe now that in order to address these issues, we really have to think about our values and what needs to stay the same, but the behaviors that need to change in our culture to support this new world, because it won't be the same. There will be those of us who come back, there will be those of us who don't, and there'll be those of us who engage in a very different way, but expect the same. And in fact, I think for the most part, they'll expect more. So that's kind of my view with a cultural slant.
I appreciate it. Yeah, listen, I scribbled some notes to myself. I love this notion of digital empathy. That's good enough to steal. Thanks, Marty. So, Cathy, let me ask you, because in my work with your organization, you have very deeply embedded values. And within the last year, you did a little bit of reframing, and you were kind of right in the middle of rolling these out, pushing them into the organization, and then bang, we find ourselves in this situation. How do you see this tension between values and how they imply sort of your core that would never shake to this notion that now we need to be more flexible and adaptable?
Yeah. So you know what, we were right in the middle of in rolling them out, and maybe that was kind of, they came to a screeching halt. All of our rollout sessions, our boot camps, all of our big leadership events, which is kind of a shame. But we found a way, you know what, to embed it into, you know, in our daily crisis management team call. It starts with the safety moment, and then, you know, we dig into our accountability and excellence models. And I know that's happening right through the business. We got people out continuing, although we're running nuclear reactors, you know, big swatches of our organization and down operations and maintenance and projects, they're out there doing leadership assessments now against our newly founded excellence and accountability models. So we've just embedded it in the way that we're working. Not ideal. And actually my team's been great too. You know, the leadership team's at home, and they've developed a virtual boot camp that will be rolling out to the workplace soon to remind everyone what we were doing before they left. So, you know, not ideal. Would we have loved to have just continued on in the same vein? But I actually think, you know, when we take a look at our behaviors and high standards and accountability for results and achieving success together and communication, you know, actually we're living these things every single day in the way that we're doing, planning for the pandemic, executing against the pandemic, and then thinking about how we're going to return to some sort of normal in the future. And I don't know, it's kind of ironic because as I sit here, you know, every second email, because they're popping up on my screen, is all about these meetings coming through around business recovery readiness, business continuity, and a number else. So, because even a week ago in businesses that wasn't happening. So something happened this week that we're all starting to think about the future. So I actually think it's a wonderful time to be thinking about what our businesses are going to be looking like going forward. And what I find kind of neat as well is even a week ago, there wasn't a lot of great resources out there. It was kind of same old, but just in the last few days, there's just been some amazing resources out there, you know, recovery readiness and things we can all learn from. And I found one particularly good, a coronavirus strategy toolkit, where it enables us to take a look at our business. And, you know, if you had a gradual recovery, what would it look like? If you had fits and starts, what would it look like? If you had the perfect storm, because we're not just dealing with a medical crisis here, we're dealing with a financial crisis. Mm-hmm. So what that would look like from your business and how you'd execute the plan. And then just kind of the great correction and how we might just have to rethink our whole overall business model. And if people, I don't know how many people you've got on the webcast, but if anyone wants some of the stuff, I can share what I've been learning over the past few days, David, and you can flip it out to the people if you wish.
I think it sounds brilliant. Yeah, so I was going to ask if what you just mentioned is that public domain. If it's something you could share, then we can feed it to Sean and he'll send it out to everybody.
Yeah, it's an open source document. So you know what? And if people have good ideas, they can feed right into it. There's some amazing stuff out there, and typical non-sharers are sharing because we are all in the same boat. Yeah. So we're learning a lot as we think about you know, getting our business back to some sort of normal in a safe way, being respectful of our, you know, our values and the way that we run our business.
Got it. Listen, I know I've been waiting to tag off with Mark. He's got some really granular questions about the tactical side of this, the pragmatic side of what it's going to mean to actually get us ready to go back to work. But if I can say, Mark, just two things. I want to build on something Cathy said, which is this notion of not forgetting as leaders how important it is that we role model the behaviors that we're expecting others to demonstrate. And that's just one of the things I have been more comfortable with as I get a little older, is that I think when you take on senior positions, senior leadership roles in organizations, the power of role modeling can't be underestimated, right? I mean, this is your chance to actually be that shining example of these values that you talk about, and it kind of helps them take them out of that abstract kind of conceptual stage, and it makes them more sort of easy to understand if you're actually, you know, providing that example for people as well. Another one I'll just mention with respect to best practices in organizations, I've been really struck with what I'm seeing coming out of Microsoft around communications for this. And they have a couple of guides. They've got one called the Guide to Working from Home During COVID. And it seems a little elementary, but it's just a template that they put out that you can use to customize to your organization. And it gives people a lot of really sort of, kind of fine-grained explanations about, what's the etiquette in these kind of digital or Zoom meetings, how we can still collaborate when we're in this virtual space. It's a great resource. And that's another one that's public domain. I'll get Sean to feed that one out. So Mark, what are your thoughts about, we've heard these ideas about where we're at and what we think tomorrow looks like, but I know that when we brainstormed last week in advance of this, you had some questions around the pragmatic side of this, like what's this really going to mean? So what are your thoughts about that? Any questions for the panel?
Yeah, for lots, and we don't have time to get to all of them, unfortunately. So I sit in this sort of unique spot, right? I do a lot of these, and so I get a chance to speak to a lot of smart people and a lot of people with points of view from sort of all over the place. And I mean, personally, I hope the new normal isn't all that digital. I do hope that I'm around other humans again at some point fairly soon. I've heard lots of predictions. So one of the lawyers that was on the CVCA webinar this morning said, most companies out there don't have disease management protocols and policies in place. Everyone's going to have that. I've had somebody tell me that they see a shift away from office towers toward more spread out environments, which have been out of vogue for 50 years now. I've heard lots of prognostications. So, maybe I would maybe we'll start here. If you put yourself in the shoes of a people manager, what are some really practical things you have to think about as you have employees physically come back to work? What would you expect there? Marty, could we talk to you first about that?
You kicked it off. You're definitely not going to have to address the space issue, certainly in the short term, if not the medium term, because there is going to be it's going to be some time until we have an inoculation, let alone a cure for this, whether we can even look at that or not. There's going to be great trepidation, fear on being close to people. We see it now for those of us who aren't on the front lines, going to the grocery store of all things. So think about the workplace, whether it's 6 foot spacing, whether it's going to be different sanitary requirements, whether it's going to be, we're already thinking in our office about the automated door issues, that because people won't have gloves on all the time. These are practical realities we're going to see just in terms of the existing offices. But I think there's going to be new forms of etiquette. I think we're going to see less and less people grouping together physically or smaller groups. Maybe that's going to be good for group dynamics anyway. That we know that groups of 7 or 8 work well or smaller. But I think we're going to see changes in space for sure. I think we're going to be changes in the migration in office space, and then we're going to have to take what is typically the employee experience that we will see in the office and try to provide an experience that is equal or greater to that in a distributed home environment. Not to mention, so many of us are comfortable working in a home environment, but there's a whole bunch that aren't, that don't have the space, that have family, that have young children. And so we're going to be dealing with the other issues of people wanting to get back to a physical, which isn't talked about as much, which is which is another issue. So a lot of it is physical space and safety, but there are, I think, other things that we need to think about in terms of, you talked about digital etiquette, David. I think we're going to be talking about actually spatial etiquette, meeting etiquette. And does the workplace become the meeting place a little bit more than it does actually the workplace for not everyone, but many people?
Dave, before I throw back to you, I just go to Val as well, because Val, you worked at the airport, right? And the airport is a place where people work and where consumers are present. And I find it hard to imagine with that level of density how that is going to be kind of worked out. I know you're probably still in touch with your colleagues there. What are you hearing about that?
Yeah, and I think it's even beyond airports. It's, it's shopping, shopping centers. It's kind of I think there's a bleeding together of workplace and community right around the world, and we're having this very common experience. And I think that Marty, you put it quite elegantly in terms of there will be a whole new set of social etiquettes, and it's not necessarily just about the government, kind of ringing the bell and saying you can all go back. There will be reticence to be sitting in restaurants. There will be reticence to be, lining up in shopping centers. And so I think that this whole notion around physical distancing in every kind of workplace will continue to be paramount for I think it's now kind of reset the bar on that. I was listening to an expert, American expert in future of work, talking about the fact that we've been on this trajectory to virtual workplacing for a long, long time. We've just now kind of all got kind of shaken into the reality of figuring out, yes, it's workable. There's lots of very good practical and economical and environmental good news about that. But one of the phrases I wrote down was, the more you can work any place, the more you need to love your office. So I'm with Marty in saying that workplaces will not necessarily just be about places where people sit in their cubicles and sit in front of computers, because they can do that anywhere. They will need to be designed. And yes, many people are talking about shrinking their footprints, and the lay of the office towers and so on is going to be very, very different. But workplaces will be places where people go, gather, socialize, collaborate in different ways. The flip side of that I've heard, and I have a son who tells me this is all great news for the introverts out there. There are so many people talking about how much more efficient it is to collaborate electronically and to get down to business and get things done. And so I do think that once we figure out kind of and every organization will have a different formula here, but once we figure out what the new balance is, there could really be some productivity gains that come out of this new normal.
Mark, I know you didn't ask me, and I know you were going to throw to David, but can I just pop a couple things in there as well?
Yeah, of course.
Sure. So I agree with everything that Marty and Val have said, but we're going to be really innovative of the kinds of things that we're putting into our workplaces, just with respect to everything to do with temperature checking. And, just an industrial setting, we have showers. People come out of industrial settings and they shower. We're going to, our bathrooms are going to be different. Our cafeterias are going to be different. Like everything, any common space is going to have to be different in our world. And businesses have got to be thinking about this. So when our employees come back to work in whatever way, shape, or form they come back, they're going to have to see a difference, and it can't be one and done. It needs to sustain itself for a very long period of time. And I will say too, like we're doing a ton of work right now thinking about what testing protocols might be in the future, whether they be PCR tests to know if people have the virus, but more importantly, the antibody tests. And that's just going to be a way of the world, so that we know who has immunity or some level of immunity over the coming months and years. Also, our managers need a whole lot of help. They're scared through this period of time, and they're managing in an entirely different way. So there's going to be challenges in all of our business, making sure they get the help. And then it's ironic that May is Mental Health Month in Canada. Mental health challenges coming out of this are going to be immense. And so we're going to be dealing with this in our households, in our businesses. And so as a business, we all have to be ready for that. And then I just have to echo that, we found really interesting ways to get work done. And sometimes it's been more productive and more expedient. And, there might be a wish to kind of go back to the way we did it before, but it's a great opportunity for us to be thinking about just revolutionizing some of the ways that we've done work from the past. So I think, sorry to jump in, but I think they're all kind of really key. And some of them are difficult. Testing is difficult. And then constantly we're doing a lot of track and tracing on our employees as they're out on self-isolation, or they've been tested for COVID, all that sort of stuff. That's not going to end, because until vaccines in place, we're going to have to continue doing all that tracking and tracing, monitoring people in our workplace, having them out on self-isolation. So it would be nice to be able to turn all the switches and all that go off, but it's not going to. So we got to work that all into our paradigm going forward while running a business that's going to have to make money.
Yeah, understand. Mark, I know you said you were going to throw to me, but I also know that at some point you wanted to maybe tap into some questions that are coming in from the group. Do you want to do that? You want to take that pivot? Looking at the time, I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah, we don't. Of course, we're running out of time, and of course, we could spend 3 or 4 hours on this. There's one that's been upvoted a lot here, and it's a question around key skills that leaders and organizations are going to have to develop if they don't have it now, to not only survive but thrive. And so I thought maybe that'd be a good place for each of the panelists to weigh in for a couple minutes. So again, 2 or 3 key skills for leaders or leading organizations to develop, not just to survive, but to thrive through this.
I saw Val's hand go up.
Yeah, well, I've been, one of the things about being in transition is that unlike a lot of my CHRO friends who have their heads down working through this day in and day out and working 15-hour days, I've actually digested a lot of the thought leadership that's coming online. So in terms of individual leaders, and I think both Cathy and Marty have made reference to this, conscious, other-centered leadership, right? So leading with kindness and compassion and empathy and egolessness and humility, those are table stakes now. Those aren't just fuzzy nice to haves. Well-being and self-care. So, leaders who actually do get enough sleep and take care of themselves from a health and well-being perspective is really, really important when you're working through anxiety. And anxiety, one cannot be productive, creative, innovative, collaborative when one is anxious, right? When we're anxious, we're very much in fight and flight. That's where all the people were, starting to hoard the toilet paper and so on, because people are very self-centered. And unlocking employees' anxiety and helping people stay mentally healthy and well, leaders and their employees, is the key to productivity. And especially then when you have a more remote workforce going forward, regardless of whether you have a pandemic context, you need to continue to tap into and check in with employees. Just to rhyme off a couple of the other key critical capabilities: crisis leadership, innovation, curiosity, agility. And then in terms of what organizations need to get good at, obviously crisis management, leadership, business continuity, digitization, and medical knowledge. Again, table stakes for organizations to have a kind of a key competency now around medical knowledge. I'll pass it back.
Marty, how about you? Key skills to not just survive, but thrive.
Yeah, there's so many. I think I talked about soft skills before. I think, leaders, are truly one of the things we haven't talked. We've heard about, certainly through the example that Cathy's organization at Bruce is setting. But the coexistence now in terms of what we're going through as a global, not just as an organizational leadership business community, of purpose and profit and their ability to coexist, which millennials have been teaching us about forever. I don't think that those things those can no longer be in competition in any way. And I think people will see through that. I think leaders are going to need to espouse that, unlock the power in that, figure out where that sits in their own personal place. I think collaborating in the real world and in the digital world, Mark, I don't think getting together is going to be over at all. But I think also as leaders, you're going to have the courage to be able to say, we need to get together on this as a group, both physically, not just on a collective basis. It's going to take a little bit more courage than we have, for the reasons being that safety, both physical and psychological safety, the mental health Cathy just talked about, as well as the physical well-being, the emotional well-being, is going to be so much greater. And I don't recall taking that course in my under or graduate level business case. And I certainly learned it by making all the mistakes and learning through others. And I guess the last thing that I think about is really the ability to show, is to be real and show great concern. I've been amazed watching the New York Governor, Andrew Cuomo, throughout this, and the example he set of not having the answers as recently as yesterday, taking responsibility for these 15,000 deaths. And surely it's not his responsibility, but he takes that seriously. And I think being very real and transparent is so much more important than ever. And the great opportunity here is that we can become so much better. New industries, new companies. I know my business is going to be very, very different coming out of this and into the future than it was going into it. Hopefully I'll have the presence of mind to be able to be thankful for that, because there are days now where it feels, like heavy lifting. But I think a community as well. We have this culture community in Canada's Most Admired. But now this community gets way bigger, and the ability to help each other, and in order to build more competitive Canadian organizations on the global stage is certainly there. And I think leaders who take advantage of those networks, take advantage of profit, purpose, collaboration, as well as this whole concept of safety and transparency and being real, will be exceptionally valuable to their organizations, and more importantly to the people they serve.
Maybe Cathy, if we could come to you. We don't have a lot of time, but what have you got for us?
It's funny because I have a little thing posted on my computer. I leave up, and it's stay healthy, stay strong, and take care of yourself. Because I think leaders are we're in this for the long haul. And so we do need to take care of ourselves. And then the other ones that come to mind are just compassion, communicate, like on steroids. Like we think in the past, it's going to have to be on steroids. Patience, passion, tenacity, and very resourceful, because we're going to do things very differently in the future than we've done in the past. And then courage, because we're not always going to get it right, and people are going to perhaps call us out for that. But we're doing the best we can with the information we know, and we'll move onward.
Mark, can I just offer one thing, which I know how pressed we are for time, but with respect to this notion of surviving and thriving, I think one of the things that's going to be a real differentiator for leaders is time management. And I know that sounds elementary, but I'm guessing most people are like me in that it's so easy to get kind of chewed up by the day-to-day. We started this call before the participants jumped on. The first thing I said is, does it feel like Wednesday? Well, it's not Wednesday, it's Thursday. And I think most of us are in this space where we're just churning, and before you know it, it's 8, 9 o'clock, you're still doing emails. And when I say time management's important, what I actually am most worried about is that we are so focused on the day-to-day fires that are popping up on our desk, we're not thinking strategically about the future. And I do think that that's one of the things that makes it so fuzzy about defining this new normal, is that I think a lot of organizations haven't really had that conversation about what are we going to look like 3 to 5 years from now? And even more importantly, what do we want to look like? I hate to talk about silver linings in a situation like this, but if there is one, I think that this is a chance for us to be more strategic than we probably ever have been, because so many things have been taken off the table, including this anchor of our history, right? We can't just be what we were in the past. So this is a chance for us to really stretch and think strategically about what do we want to be 3 to 5 years from now. And it's hard to do that if you don't carve out the time and segment it to actually think more proactively. So that's why I think time management, maybe I'm the only one, but I just find like my days are just getting chewed up like crazy.
Brilliant.
That's well said. We're up against it on time. So Dave has been good enough to offline here, sort of through the text, say he'll stick around for some rapid fire questions. Marty and Cathy and Val, of course, if you've got to go, we'll let you go. But for the audience there, if anybody wants to stick around for 10 or 15 minutes for some rapid fire Q&A, we're happy to do that. There's some stuff I actually want to get at. So Dave and I will certainly do that. And again, for Marty and Cathy and Val, if you want to and you can, amazing. And if you can't, don't worry about it at all. Sean, could you just throw the recap slide up, and then we'll. So I was going to do a very shameless plug here for the Academy, but we don't have time. So can you just flip to the recap slide, Sean? Yeah, so, fantastic conversation from all our guests today. We talked a bit about where we are right now. And I think, Val, you should be writing a book, because there were a whole bunch of questions about your 4R model. People want to get a hold of that. In Territory 2, we dug into what the new normal looks like. And I think if I took something away from here, it's not like that. It's like this. There isn't one new normal. There's going to be a really messy return to work, and it's going to depend by industry. And then we talked about this idea of transitioning back and kind of what that looks like. And there are some best practices. It sounds like health is going to be top of the list, both physical and employee health. So for the audience that has to go, thank you very much for joining us today. We'll be back with you next week with a different session. And for anybody that does want to stick around, we'll go into the Q&A now. Sean, maybe you could take that down. If Marty and Cathy and Val, do any of you have to bounce?
I can stay for 15 minutes.
Okay, great. Well, let's shoot for 10. So I'm going to kick it off with one, and then Dave, you can run the rest of this if you like. And Cathy, it's to you. I've been dying to ask this actually since last week. Why are you so far ahead? Why were you 6 or 8 weeks ahead of everybody else?
Well, you know what? In our business, we are always ahead because that's just kind of the business we run. We're out there, and we're in an industry too that even though we compete with each other, we share, and we do it because of safety. So we share what we call OpEx all around the globe, even with direct competitors kind of thing. So that helped a lot. A boss that's very tenacious, that he got us looking out there, even when people probably in my shop, and I've got the greatest team ever, and they have been phenomenal through this. You really know who your utility players as you're going through this. Even them, we're going, are we sure we're gonna cut off travel to really early on? And it was just, we are uber cautious when anything to do with safety. And it just goes right back to our number one value. So anything that potentially could impact the safety of our plants, we got ahead of it. And at the time, it felt really early because, now we know probably the virus was in North America, but
Sure.
at the time, we didn't think it was in North America. So I thank God we did it because we got ahead. But I think it's just the nature of our business, a very astute CEO. And we were doing a ton of research, seeing what was happening around the world, knowing it was coming our way.
Okay, Dave, where do you want to go next?
Well, we've talked a little bit about best practices, and I appreciate what you said, Mark, which is there's not just a single solution to this. I'm assuming it was half joking, but I actually got an email last night from someone about today's webinar, and this person said, can't wait to find out what the new normal is. Like, we're going to wrap some magic silver bullet. I do think it's going to be different for everybody. But I think another thing we can maybe look at is not just what we should strive to be doing, but from the perspective of the panelists, are there any things that you would view as the big hiccups or big mistakes that an organization should avoid doing right now?
We have to go slow. You know what? I think in business, we want to go fast, and just what you're seeing play it on CNN or Fox News, where they want to go fast as possible. I think we're going to survive and thrive in the end if we go against our natural inclination and go slow. And that's going to be tough for businesses, particularly businesses that are very, had their revenue impacted. But otherwise, we're going to have fits and starts, and that's probably not good for any of our businesses. And it's going to scare our employees more. It's going to scare the general population more. So I'm thinking that.
Dave, this is bad news for us. I want to go as fast as humanly possible.
Yeah.
Such bad news.
No, but you do, but then it could backfire, So it's a real balance. And unfortunately, we don't know where we're balancing yet. So we'll figure it out.
And I think there's some real dichotomies in organizations right now. There's so many organizations whose values espouse quality, excellence as their their key measures of success, and yet perfection is the enemy right now, right? So, I mean, if I just look at the biggest role model that I see is when I listen to to how our government day by day rolls out plans and programs and protocols that should have been on the drawing board for months, if not years. And they're issuing it real time, and they're getting most of it right and some of it wrong, and then they're putting in the patchworks. And that's kind of how we need to roll. So I would say that any organization or any leadership, one leader or leadership team that has kind of made its success formula about getting it perfect and getting it right really needs to relinquish a lot of control right now. And the other dichotomy I see is that whereas of course you need to have your crisis response team centralized and centralize that decision making and have the war room or whatever you want to call it, you also need to distribute lots and lots of decision making and empowerment to a lot of people to get their work done, because you can't have bottlenecks when you're out there delivering. And so, I think people really need to wrestle with what has made them successful so far. And to Marty's point, If culture is about how we work, what's important, if values is about what's important here, we can maintain those. But if culture is about how we behave, how we make decisions, how we work, we might need to restrike that. And I think many organizations are, as we speak, restriking what that success formula looks like.
Beautiful, Val. I got to tell you, I just scribbled down that phrase, perfection is the enemy. That's tattoo worthy. I love that. That's awesome. Marty, what are your thoughts? Like, what would be something we should definitely not do or avoid?
Well, I'm really in Val and Cathy's camp here, and I'm not afraid to admit I was that person early on saying, "This is the flu, right? This is the flu. Are we sure that we're doing all the right things?" Well, I'm pretty sure we're doing everything we know how to do right now and figuring out the rest. I think societally we need to be slow and cautious. We're talking about human life here, and we've never really been had to address this. And those of us, or our parents or loved ones who have lived, or many of new Canadians who've lived through war have, but we really haven't. And that's just a whole different conversation. When it comes to the opportunity to be better and innovate and create new services, we asked in that same survey, what organizations, what are you planning to do to help you emerge from this crisis? And 60% said improve products or services or build new products or services. I mean, that's pretty exceptional. And I think that's where we can figure that out and go fast. That's where we can collaborate within industry, outside of industry, public, private. This can make us all better. And I think that's where this opportunity lies. And that's where technology will help us. And that's where you here at Ivey deserve a ton of credit for doing things like this and opening up ideas. That's what higher education is sharing ideas and learning. And I really tip my hat to anyone who open source codes, which is so many organizations today, just what they're doing. So, but on the safety front, I think we can't go slow enough to ensure that the people of the world are safe, not just our own country, but everybody else. And this is going to take a little time, but I think coming out of it, we're all going to be in a better place. Hopefully the hugs and handshakes come back, but they should come back when they come back, and in the appropriate measure with the appropriate people, when we all know we're safe enough to do it. Not next week, not next month.
Mark, you know what? Not to be scary you, because I did say slow, but it could be a stage slow. So there's some things like next week, we're going to start doing some new things in our business, and we're going to do it right. And we're going to get it right. And we're going to have tame down the apprehension as a result of it. So more people will come into the business because we've got a key project that needs to get done. And when they come in, they're going to see something very different. They're going to do the work differently. They're going to have new ways of working. And then that's going to be successful. And then we'll go to the next stage. So, slow, but it can be done in stages so that you're actually still making progress.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an impatient guy, Cathy.
I am too.
Thank God I'm not in charge. Oh wait. We don't have a lot of time left. I do want to try and get to a couple of audience questions that came in. Sean, you've been watching this. I've got one that I think is good, but let's go to you first. What do you think here?
Sure. I mean, I'm seeing at least a few questions around this issue of timing, and maybe one a little bit further down exemplifies it. James is with a manufacturer that has been deemed essential, but they've donated a lot of the PPE that they have been able to acquire to public health agencies. And they're sort of wondering, at what point do they start looking to retain that PPE for their own workers to kind of start getting back to normal? So keep in mind, they are an essential business, but I think it kind of represents this shift in thinking between the immediate urgency of trying to make sure that our frontline healthcare workers have what they need, to sort of looking at a more longer term outlook.
So I'd say now, I mean, we've given a lot of PPE away, like a ton of PPE away, but we're really a great business, but I can assure you we've kept some PPE for our own. So our people that can't work greater than 6 feet apart, they need masks, and we've got gloves, and we've got lots of sanitizers and what have you. So we've been very benevolent, and we're helping our communities, which is fabulous. but we're making sure that we are safe for our employees too. So I think it's a balance. And if they haven't started stockpiling for themselves, they should start doing that, I would say.
Mhm.
Let's do one more. We've got from an anonymous attendee, but I can imagine a bunch of organizations that look like this. So it says, any suggestions for how an organization that was in the midst of an ugly restructure pre-COVID with low morale, internal battles between the old guard and the new guard can sort of manage their way through this? Is this a nightmare, or is this actually an opportunity for an organization that's in that boat? Marty, why don't we start with you?
It's an opportunity, completely an opportunity. I mean, it may require a step back. I know of an organization going through this right now, and they decided, hey, now, to David's point earlier, where do we want to be now when we get through this? Is that different than what we had talked about before? And they have decided to almost employee crowdsource the whole kind of revaluing of their values, reconstituting of their values, I should say, to just make sure that what they do is the right thing. So I think it's a real opportunity. It may be painful. There's the old expression, which I think is going to go away, which is never waste a crisis. We're all going to know what a crisis is. We're all in one crisis or another right now. But I think the opportunity here is how do you create opportunity out of crisis? And it's not always that easy, but it doesn't have to be only about who wants to be weaker when you come out of it than stronger? And what does that look like? And so I think that's an opportunity for discussion. I think it's an opportunity for an organization to kind of take a step back to now determine in the new normal, in the reality, what do they really want, and what are they prepared to do to get there? Because when we're going through transition, somehow, some way, as resilient humans that we are, we get through it. We dig in. We find our own grit to whatever stage we can, and we prepare while we're doing it. And we are resilient as a society, and organizations can be the same. And I think their people know more, team members know more than we think they do. So those that ask and listen and decide what they want to respond to, and then provide the leadership to where they're going to go, they're going to benefit, as hard as it may be.
We're way over time here. Why don't we do this? Dave, final substantive word to you. Then Sean, can you just close us out on logistics, where this is recorded, how we're going to do the follow-up and whatnot?
I'll make it really fast. And it's building on what Marty said and ties back to this question about if you weren't in that perfect space, this organization going through the middle of a restructuring, morale's low, then suddenly it's like this icing on the cake. I don't like that phrase, never waste a crisis. I think it just rings of, it's just cheesy. But I think that there is some opportunity embedded in this if you've got the right leadership at the top. And a lot of this has to do, I think, with how it plays out and whether or not it's going to be viewed as manipulative and taking advantage of a situation, or if it's sincere. And we could have another webinar on what is sincerity and authenticity with leaders and where does it come from. To me, my experience has been one of the primary drivers of authenticity and sincerity is consistency. I always tell people that when you're thinking about how you're going to step into a situation and what hat you might need to wear, just be ready to wear whatever hat that is more than just one day, right? And I think we've all seen situations where a leader steps up, gives some fantastic speech that's meant to make everyone cry at just the right moment, and then they go back to doing their business the exact same way it was in the past. I'd rather anyone find something small rather than great, but whatever that small thing is, do it consistently. And I think that helps people realize that it's not just taking advantage of the situation or being manipulative.
That's well said, Dave. And by the way, you just volunteered for another webinar on authenticity, and it's on tape. So speaking of tape, Sean, close us out here. Where's the recording going to be? How do we get Val's 4R model? How do we follow up with Marty and with Cathy and answer some of these questions that we had through the Q&A?
So we do have more Q&A as usual than we could ever get to, but if you folks are amenable to it, we'll follow up offline with maybe a couple of questions each, and then include some of your answers in a blog write-up that will be posted on iveyacademy.com. Thank you again to all of our viewers. If you're really eager to share this with a friend or a colleague, it will be up live on YouTube in about 15 minutes. So you won't have to wait long. We're Ivey Academy on YouTube. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll sign off.
Marty, Cathy, Val, fantastic job today. Dave, great job. Thank you. Thanks everyone who tuned in. Appreciate it. Stay safe out there.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.